Hello, can everyone hear me? Hello? Okay, perfect. Okay, so welcome everybody. This is one of our first webinars for the quarter. My name is Crystal Ramos Barrera. I'm the VP of Mentorship for the North Cal region. And we prepared this webinar to, I guess, share different experiences that we've had in pre-health conferences and how we have gone about networking and finding mentors. With me, I have two other presenters, Raul Salazar, who is a first-year medical student through the CDU Prime LA program, and Tiffany Calero, who was part of the UC Irvine Postbac program. And also, if you have any questions throughout the PowerPoint, you can type them on the chat and we'll do our best to address them as we go. Okay. So again, our goal is to maximize the experience of going to pre-health conferences and make your time more efficient in terms of finding mentors and networking with professionals and fellow alumni. This is kind of the outline for today. We'll discuss how to find conferences where you can go and sign up for them, see upcoming dates. We'll talk about dress code, how to identify mentors, what that means, also how to approach them, and how to follow up once you've identified a group of mentors that you feel comfortable with. So finding pre-health conferences can be challenging because there's a lot of them happening throughout the year, and it's difficult sometimes to see where to look. So the first thing I recommend is going through social media. So there's a few pre-health groups that I follow personally, CCM, LMSA. They're kind of nationwide groups that they usually have pre-health conferences happening throughout the year in different regions. There's also our platform, the Mi Mentor platform. So whenever we have an upcoming event or we know of an upcoming event, we usually post it on our website. And we also have a newsletter that I believe goes out every month where you can check any upcoming events or conferences. Also, make sure that if you haven't already, make sure that you are creating a Mi Mentor profile. That's the best way to connect to each other and find mentors. Also, if you're in school, you can reach out to your pre-health advisor. I went to UCLA, and for our campus, we didn't have one, but I was part of CCM, so that was a group that really helped me connect to mentors on campus and off campus. I know that UC Davis has one, and I think if you do research on your institution, I'm sure that they have some type of career prep office or program that can help you connect with conferences. And also, sometimes there's different chapters for different organizations in your institution. For example, LMSA has a chapter at UCLA. I think they have chapters at USC, UC Davis. So it's just a matter of looking on campus to see what you can find. So once you go to a pre-health conference, they usually will have an agenda. So either a few days before the conference happens or like a rough outline. And in the agenda, it's important to see. So I have an example of, I think, a conference that will be happening through LMSA. So the agenda shows you like a rough outline of what the conference was set up to be. So you'll have keynote speakers, what workshops are coming up. Sometimes they'll have a research symposium, which means that there's students that come and present their research and what they've done, either with that institution or different institutions. And the exhibition fair, which is where medical schools can come and present their program. Sometimes they'll bring alumni with them that can talk about their experience doing a certain program or being part of an institution. And sometimes they'll have like a networking hour at the end of the conference where you can talk to professionals or members of that school. Um, let's see what else. And here I kind of compile a list of the conferences that are upcoming. So in October, we have the UC Davis PreHealth Conference coming up. I've personally taken part of this conference. It's a very large conference. I believe they have maybe over 200 institutions come and table, and it's not only about pre-medical for pre-medical students. I think they have pre-PA, pre-dental, pre-vet, so all kind of like different programs come and table at this conference, and they have different workshops going on. Going on. It's been traditionally it's been 2 days, a 2 day conference, but I think last year it was only a 1 day conference, and I think they're gonna do the same this year. There's also the UCSF PreHealth Conference coming up in October. I haven't been part of this one, but I'm sure it's great. And in November, there's also the UCI LMSA SNMA PreHealth Conference. It's gonna be at the UCI Medical School, and it's again a great opportunity to network. All these three conferences, you have to pay a fee to buy the ticket. However, the MedPed PreHealth Conference is free, which is also a great resource to find mentors and learn more about the pre-medical path. So, when you prepare for a pre-health conference, I think a lot of people um, don't think about this, but it's really important your attire because you never know who you'll meet. And a lot of conferences, because institutions go to those conferences to recruit, so you'll see deans sometimes of programs there. So it really matters how you present yourself. Um, so for conferences, I would always make sure to dress professional, just as if you would interview. So for women, what that means is either dress pants or dress skirt, blazer. Um, you know, very formal. Same goes for men. And comfortable shoes. I think conferences, because they're so large, sometimes that you have to walk so much. I think it makes it better if you have comfortable shoes and you look formal. Again, neutral colors for both men and women. And it's important also that you bring a notebook and something to write with because you'll be meeting people and you'll be taking down their information. So it just makes you look sharp. It makes you look prepared. And another thing that people don't think about is bringing your CV. Because again, to conferences, to pre-health conferences, there's a lot of different organizations that come. So not only institutions, but scribing organizations or volunteering organizations where it gives you an opportunity to meet them, and that's like their first impression of you, and you want to make sure that you're ready. I've personally been fortunate to find a job through one of the pre-health conferences I went to as a scribe. And I think it just makes you look prepared and sharp and that you're ready if you have your CV with you, ready to hand it out if needed. Um, some items to avoid in terms of dress um, is open toe shoes. I think that it definitely doesn't make you look as formal or as sharp. Any oversized jewelry should be also avoided in graphic shirts or clothes. So before you go to a conference, if you can and if you are able to find the agenda online, you should definitely do your research. So make sure you know where the conferences will be held, if there's a way for you to waive parking, or if there's validation offered. Also, make sure you know about the organization that's hosting the event. So whether it be LMSA or SNMA, and also make sure that you know who the speakers are. So look through the agenda, try to see if there's a website for the event. I know that one of the last conferences that I went to for LMSA, they had an app where you were able to connect to fellow attendees through the app. And that was another way for them to let you network. And also, when you find kind of like the background of the speakers, you'll see if they're doing any research that may interest you, or what's their specialty. Maybe you're interested in pediatrics, and who knows, if you ask them, you can shadow them or volunteer with them somehow. And I think being informed and knowing kind of like who is talking to you in terms of speakers, it's easier to form a conversation and show interest because it shows that you've done the research, that you're prepared, and you're ready to take any opportunity they can offer. The same goes for the exhibition fair. So before, I guess, when you start the conference, they'll give you the agenda and they'll show you the layout of the tables. And you'll see what type of institutions are coming to the conference and who will be tabling. So this really gives you an opportunity to maximize your time, because oftentimes you only have like an hour or an hour and a half to kind of talk to different institutions. So if you know the layout and if you know who's coming, then you can target those people that you're interested in, whether it be for medical schools in California or any other type of program that you might be looking at. And then the last thing is, if you are going to a pre-health conference with the hope of talking to an institution or meeting a speaker, you should definitely have questions prepared. And I guess you should be careful with this step because there are questions that you can easily find online. So you should ask things that you can't find online, and that, I guess, show your interest better in the school or the program. So during the conference, again, conferences are very large, so you have to make sure that you identify your interest, and that you have a list of target schools or programs. I believe I skipped a slide. Give me 1 second. Oh, sorry. I skipped this one. Sorry, so let me back up. So before you go to a conference, make sure that you're confident. I think that's a big part of the experience. Know that a lot of the people that attend those conferences are there to help you. They take time out of their schedule to sit down with students and give one-on-one guidance about pre-health path. It also helps you be more efficient. It's a way for you to step out of your comfort zone. And also remember that mentors have themselves asked someone at one point, otherwise they wouldn't have gotten there. Again, conferences it's a great space for you to be honest about your trend or GPA, because you'll get to see or meet representatives of certain institutions. So, and the best way that they can help you is by you being honest about your red flags or academic, I guess, academic struggles that you've encountered in the past. So I went over this. Okay, so going back to during the conference. So before I go to conferences, I always keep a goal of how many contact information or how many people I want to meet. So I tell myself, okay, my goal today is to talk to this institution and get the contact information of at least 2 alumni. So that's a good way for you to be more efficient and make better use of your time. Definitely keep your interest broad. So it's ideal for you to have and to meet someone that's a professional, but it's also great if you meet someone that's an alumni or an MD. I think having a team of mentors can give you a more broad perspective of medicine, especially if you're unsure on what specialty you want to pursue. Um, so I would also keep that in mind. So, how do you approach mentors during the conference? Um, so I think uh, definitely you have to know why you're approaching them. So, is there a mentor that you're hoping to work with um, shadowing? Or is it a mentor that you want to help you with your application? Is it someone that you want to have read your essays? Or do you just want general advice? So I think all of this should go through your head before you approach someone, because you want to make sure that one, you have a clear purpose for the interaction, and two, that the other person knows how they can help you. And the way you should approach them is prepare a 5-minute elevator pitch. So before you attend the conference, I think this is a great opportunity for you to prepare and draft down a few points that you want to tell the other person about yourself, about your goals, about your struggle, and how they can help you. Make sure you talk about your interest and whatever workshop they did, or what you thought about whatever topic they presented on. Again, state your purpose with the potential mentor. What do you need from them? Do you need them to review your app, look at your trend? Are you looking to shadow? And take down their information. So make sure, again, you always have a notebook with you so that you can write down their email, their phone number, and their name. And I would also write down where you met them, just in case you forget, and you have that ready when you send them a follow-up. Okay, so I'm gonna transfer over to Tiffany. I think she'll present the rest of the slides.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Crystal, for starting us off. In terms of just a friendly reminder to each and every one of you all, we do have a chat. So if there are any questions that you may have, feel free to go ahead and use that chat. We will also have a Q&A towards the end. But for this slide, we are focusing on the elevator pitch that Crystal mentioned. So in this elevator pitch, some key things that you want to make sure that you're covering includes your name, your goal. So whether that may be pursuing medical school, MD, DO, or dental school. If you're pursuing PA school, that's also something that you want to cover. And you also want to make sure to touch upon the current stage that you're at. So, for example, um, once you graduate, if you're studying for the MCAT, or if you're at, you know, post-baccalaureate student, or even a junior college student that's ready to apply, that just gives a little bit more context for the mentor to really understand at what point and kind of what resources maybe they can direct you towards. In terms of the purpose for the interaction, again, as Crystal mentioned, you want to be direct in the way that each mentor can assist you, whether that be reviewing medical school essays, providing overall guidance on academic trends, or perhaps even connecting you to another student that recently went through the medical school process. Um, I think sometimes when it comes to networking, we tend to just focus on the individual that we're meeting then and there, and we don't realize that networking just does not encompass that person before you. It really encompasses their network as well. So don't be shy or afraid to ask them if they can connect you to another resource or a contact as well. All right. So as Crystal mentioned as well, there is typically in most pre-health conferences, I would say towards the lunchtime area, there is an exhibition fair. And during this time, this is an opportunity for lots of institutions, whether it be medical schools, master's programs, or even volunteer organizations, or even job opportunities to really kind of present some information. Um, and I think this allows you to really think more broadly about other opportunities. You really get to know about other campuses, other institutions that are beyond, you know, where you are locally. So, for example, personally, I have attended the Stanford Pre-Health Conference, which is known as SUMA. And in that conference, I would say that I had the opportunity to interact with a lot of East Coast medical schools. So, for example, University of Pennsylvania, Cornell was there. So, a lot of schools that I myself have never perhaps even thought or even had the opportunity to ask really concrete questions about their curriculum. So, through that conference, I had the opportunity to really understand and really kind of engage with alumni that, again, I would not have had the opportunity if this exhibition fair wasn't there. In terms of each institution where they table, you are able to ask, again, really specific questions on the admissions process. So this is an opportunity where you're able to engage one-on-one, and typically a lot of admissions officers are here tabling. So you also want to be mindful of the questions that you're asking. But again, this is a great opportunity for you to ask specifics. So whether it be financial aid, opportunities, dual degree programs, for example, a lot of the UC medical schools, right? Prime would be an example of that. Another example would be, you know, ACE at UC Davis. So there's a lot of intricate programs in each institution. This is where you can delve in a little bit deeper. In terms of meeting past and current alumni, this is also an opportunity where maybe you didn't get to interact with the presenter, maybe you ran out of time and you see them at the exhibition fair. You can go ahead and also kind of touch base and kind of exchange contact information as well. Again, as Crystal mentioned, there are potential job opportunities and student organization opportunities. So feel free to, you know, I would make sure to tackle each table and really make sure that you talk to each and every individual, because you may not know, there may be an organization that you've never heard about or a summer opportunity whose deadline is upcoming. So it's always great to step out of your comfort zone and make sure to tackle each table. And another great thing is you get lots of free items. So there's a lot of swag, promotional pens, and who doesn't like a free item? All right. So after the conference, I think personally myself, I tend to, I think aside from approaching the mentor then and there, another nerve-wracking part of networking is following up. But the thing to remember is that this is really a key step in terms of forming that relationship with your mentor. So as Crystal mentioned, you really want to make sure that you are organized, whether that be, creating a chart or listing each contact that you've had and making sure to email your mentor. I think no later than a week is a good rule of thumb. Ideally, I tend to target, I would say, the next day. The more recent follow up, I would say the easier and better, kind of fresher, you're on their mind a little bit better than, after a week or so. It's really tough for a professional, especially, a physician, to keep track. So in your email, things that you want to make sure that you include, I would definitely introduce yourself yet again, mention your full name, where institution are you coming from, how did you meet them? So for example, if you attended a specific workshop, for example, Women in Medicine, I would also kind of touch upon perhaps something really specific that you discussed. So maybe once you approach that presenter, you forged a connection of maybe having the same hometown. So sparking up those unique details hopefully will trigger that presenter or mentor to remember the conversation you held. And I think another thing that is kind of important is having an email signature with your contact information and title. So I've attached kind of my current signature, and it doesn't have to be anything, you know, graphic or artistic. I think as long as you have your full name and your institution as well as your contact info, it's really useful. I personally have a small photo of myself. I think, as humans, we tend to be more visual. So hopefully with the picture, at least it'll jog their memory a little bit better. And that's something we can delve a little bit deeper if that's another item that you all have any questions on, that email signature. But it really does add another layer of just creating that formal environment and just showcasing how professional you are and how prepared you are. As far as the purpose, again, you always want to touch base. A lot of the mentors and presenters that you'll be interacting with are incredibly busy. So you'd like to always be direct in terms of how they can help you. So if you want them to read your application, your personal statement, or just have an overall mentorship relationship, I think that's really key. If you're looking for shadowing opportunities, that's always something, you can always, I personally like to separate it, like not to get into specifics, but I like to dedicate one paragraph, or not a paragraph, maybe a sentence or two about introducing myself, the context of how we met, space out the second, again, the second kind of paragraph, focus on more of the purpose. Oftentimes, you may send like a very bulky email, and individuals tend to get a little bogged down by too much information. So try to keep it concise, direct, yet informative. If they don't reply, again, feel free to follow up. Follow up 3 or more times or less. Most people, again, these are incredibly busy professionals that not only lead very busy work, but also, personal lives, and you want to be cognizant of the time and the availability that they have. In terms of following up, we'll go into specifics about how, consistent you should be with those follow-up emails. But to be honest, don't be scared to follow up. Don't be afraid to do so. I myself have followed up like 6 or, I would say 4 to 6 times on one mentor, and she just informed me, oh, I've been really busy with rounds, so thank you so much. I'm so happy that you followed up with me, and we were able to coordinate a meeting and a call. So we have drafted some general questions for the Q&A, but again, I think this will be an opportunity for you all to chime in with any specific questions. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Raul before we begin the Q&A, if there are anything else that he would like to add.
Hello? Can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. As was mentioned, I am a first-year medical student over at the Charles Drew portion of the Prime program at UCLA. I just want to take a few moments to kind of echo some of the things that Tiffany and Crystal have mentioned, and kind of share a little bit about my experience with networking. Just overall, though, like I never really found, or early on when I was attending conferences, uh, professional attire was not really my big thing, but now I definitely value and have an immense. I highly recommend that everyone really take that into account when attending these professional conferences. As was mentioned, you never know who you're going to encounter. If you go to, for instance, the UC Davis PreHealth conference taking place in October, if you attend specific workshops, you're obviously going to be meeting the speakers, and usually these guys are heavy hitters. Either they're deans or actual people that sit on admissions committees for each individual school. But when you go to the networking fair, the exhibitor fair, you might be meeting people from the admissions office that may or may not have a say on your application itself, but it goes a long way to have that professional, to approach the scenario with a more professional intent. So definitely dress for the occasion. If you were like me, you probably didn't have or don't have too much professional attire. So I say scope out. A little tip that I got from a friend was to scope out deals, especially now that holidays are coming up. Scope out some specific deals for interview attire, buying a suit. They can get pretty cheap during these holiday season. Um, I myself was never really too great at networking. And that's just something that I kind of had to work on. Personally, I found it not necessarily nerve-wracking, but very, I guess, superficial interactions that you have with people. And the way I kind of approached it is, as was mentioned, don't be shy. If anything, use the buddy system. Something I found really helpful attending conferences is to have someone actually go with you to these tabling events and kind of both of you ask your questions, and it makes things a lot more, I guess, easier to navigate and have a conversation with whoever's at the event tabling. Almost like having a wingman or one person. You kind of just kind of make a game out of it and uh, approach it with intent. Do your research. Ask questions that you won't necessarily find on their website, but it will spark up a good conversation that will give you a talking point eventually when you do follow up with them via email. So some of the questions that I personally like asking, you might not find them on their websites, but at least it gets the people talking about um, more, I guess, a more personalized question and conversation that you can bring up in an email conversation later. Things like like I know mental health is always a big thing at the moment for within the medical profession. What things or what resources the schools may provide for students that may be struggling, or just overall wellness, and how that's integrated into curriculum. I know that's something that's not usually talked about, but that definitely is a good conversation starter, and it's a very unique type of question to ask someone that is part of the admissions office. Another one would just simply be like, as far as retention goes, like what academic resources or support do you provide students that might be struggling or kind of have a harsh transition into medical school? Just kind of things like that that are really are very relevant to your transition to medical school or whatever professional school it is. But it really isn't like a common question that might be heard. And when you do follow up via email, you can definitely bring up that conversation. Um, as far as being prepared, definitely bring, if you do have a business card, that's cool. That's definitely good. You'll be definitely taking some business cards from the tabling event. And what I like to do is I like to write down a personal, I guess, identifier to this person that I spoke, because you'll be meeting so many people at these conferences, and it's kind of easy to mesh it all together. So immediately after talking to someone, what I like to do is write down a personal note about the conversation we just had on the back of their business card, and again, it's gonna usually follow up within a day or two and use that note to kind of shape my initial email, kind of like to spark the conversation again. Other than that, though, professional email, definitely make sure to have a professional email when you are reaching out to individuals. That's really important, whether that be your school email or a personal email. Just make sure it's not something too crazy, or um, uh, just make sure that you actually engage in conversation uh, with these individuals, these professionals, with a professional email. But other than that, though, we are open for questions. We do have some questions here as part of the Q&A. I think we have some already on here. You can also just write them in the chat or unmute yourself if you would like. Otherwise, we'll probably just go down the list here for the Q&A.
I think we have a question from the chat. So, what is the difference between a CV and a resume? I don't know if any of the speakers want to chime in.
Hi, this is Tiffany. I can go ahead and briefly elaborate. So that's a great question. What is the difference between a CV and a resume? So for the most part, a resume tends to be, I would say, typically 1 page or so, and it's more of your employment history. Whereas a CV, this is typically used for individuals that are really interested in either pursuing a research route or an academic route. So a lot of students that plan on completing graduate school, they require a CV in their application process. But a CV is a more extended list of all the activities that you've partaked in. So for example, any research presentations that you've given at any pre-health conferences, any, I would say also any workshops that you yourself have presented at, and you can also encompass any kind of volunteer commitments that you've had, any positions. So a CV tends to be on the longer side. As a tip, and I wish someone had told me this once I was younger, is I would advise everyone to kind of keep an Excel list throughout your undergraduate years. And really, as you get more and more involved in whether it be leadership roles or community service opportunities, to really jot down each opportunity as well as the commitment and positions that you've held and responsibilities with each position. Because over time, you want to keep a running list of all of your activities and involvements once you do prepare to apply to the professional school of your kind of your preference. And it's really difficult to think back, if you're not keeping organized about each opportunity. So that's my tip to you all, especially if you're a freshman or a sophomore. It's a good time to go ahead and do that running list. And once you do gear up to apply, whether it be job positions or even summer opportunities, research, or volunteer, you tend to want to customize each CV. So for example, if you're applying to a research opportunity, you want to customize it to be more research oriented versus like a volunteer opportunity. You want to highlight more of your volunteer experience. For example, if you're like a translator in a clinic setting, or if you were a tutor or whatnot. So hopefully that answered your question. I'll go ahead and I don't know if you all also want to chime in on this difference and distinction.
No, I think that was a great description, Tiffany. We have another question. What are some standout questions for students applying to the upcoming application cycle? I'm assuming you mean medical school application cycle? I don't know if any of the speakers want to share their thoughts on this question.
Yeah. First off, I just do want to say it's never too late or too early to start networking and going and attending these conferences. I highly recommend it, and I think it's actually pretty critical to go to these types of conferences, especially if you are currently in the application cycle. Um, and I can elaborate my own experience with that a little bit later. But if you intend to apply to future cycles, it's a really great way to kind of get your foot in the door per se, even if the person doesn't necessarily remember you or you won't follow up with them until like months later. At least you started that initial conversation with the individual via email, and you can always just turn back to that same email thread when you do actually intend to apply in the future, so that you're not just like a random individual reaching out months later after a conference. I just wanted to make sure to mention that before I forget. But to address your question, what are some standout questions for students applying for the upcoming application cycle? I found that it's really, again, really think outside the box, things that, I mean, of course, you can always just ask general questions. It doesn't hurt. That's actually what these conferences are about. You're just trying to get to learn a little bit more about the school itself. So it doesn't hurt to ask the very generic questions like, oh, like something about the curriculum or what activities they have um, for um, for I guess like the what more specifics on the curriculum, like whether what clinical shadowing experiences they would have entering as a first year medical student. Um, but another unique question that I was thinking about when I was applying for medical school was that what kind of resources do do they, I guess, provide for students as far as step examination? So that's really thinking like really um, forward in the future, because you don't really think about step examination until after your first year of medical school. But again, those are really like out of the box kind of questions. You can ask questions typically about the application cycle, like when do people, or what's the latest people hear back about admissions. Um, let's see, what else?
Hi, everyone. This is Tiffany. Just to add to what Raul discussed. So I myself am going through the interview season. So I think that's a great question that I myself am trying to, think about what questions not only will make you stand out, because I think oftentimes we try to think, okay, what's going to distinguish myself when applying and talking to these higher level professionals, but you really want to think about what questions do I really want to know in terms of making that important decision of what school that you want to attend. So I think good questions really would encompass what are things that are important to you. So for example, I think one thing that is vital to all students is what's a grading scheme for the preclinical curriculum or a clinical curriculum. For example, some schools, they'll rank their students, other schools are pass or fail, other schools, they're like tiered, so that, you know, may influence how their students are, you know, preparing for each class. Is there like a more, is there a better sense of just really focusing on just making sure to gather the knowledge, or does that foster competitive spirit in the campus already? So some things that are tied to the curriculum, but also the atmosphere with each institution. Another question that I think is also great to ask, and this kind of relates to what I will mention about step one, is when do students take step one? How much time do students have for studying for step one? So each institution does have like a different timeline, and if one's institution has different resources or a different timeline, that also is an important exam, very similar to the MCAT, that may determine, you know, your future specialty or focus. So those are some things to think about, as well as how am I going to be connected with mentors. So I think especially for a lot of us that may be first generation college students, a lot of institutions have different programs or even systems in play of mentorship, and I think that's a great question to kind of prepare for. Is it a more formalized setting where you are paired up with, you know, a student, a medical student who's like a year ahead of you? Are you paired up in groups and families? Excuse me. Or do you have to really actively seek out the advice and you yourself coordinate, you know, with admissions members or even alumni? As well as another question that I think is important to ask, financial aid, what scholarship opportunities are geared towards certain students ahead of time. I think that those are all real good, important questions to keep in mind.
And yeah, I agree with what Tiffany was saying. Sorry, I got cut off. I got disconnected for some reason. I'm not sure if this was mentioned already as well, but one of the things that I really, I guess, try to get out of these interactions with the school was things that I completely value and would see myself kind of being involved in during medical school. So my big thing was mentorship, opportunities for mentorship, engaging with the community. So those are some things that you can potentially find on their website. But those are the questions that I would be asking, like what opportunities for actually engaging the community, what kind of support do they provide, if there's any sort of pipeline programs that they contribute to, and for medical students to get involved in. Because ultimately, that's one of the, I guess, main goals of myself being in medical school, was to always give back to the community. And whether that be in the clinical aspect or just directly working with community, like at health fairs or through pipeline programs.
Thank you to
So
our speakers. Let me go on to the next question. How long should a CV or resume be? I think it was answered in the chat. Yeah, so pretty much resumes usually are very summarized versions of your work history. So usually one page, as opposed to a CV that Tiffany mentioned has everything you've done. So any extracurricular activity you've partaken in, or presentation, research, poster, presentation that you've done in the past. So it can be very extensive. I've seen CVs as long as 20 pages. So it really depends on how much information you can put in your CV. So I want to move on to the Q&A questions that we had prepared. Again, if you have any other questions, make sure to type them in the chat, and I'll make sure to incorporate them as we go through the Q&A. So for the first question, how soon after the conference should I reach out to my mentor? As Raul and Tiffany mentioned, the sooner the better. So within the same day, no later than a week, ideal. Should I bring business cards? I think I would. I want to let my speakers chime in on this question because, from my experience, I've been told that it's not necessary or recommended to bring business cards. But I don't know what the other speakers think.
Yeah. I think it really depends. Like if anything, if you do have a business card that you can utilize, it doesn't hurt. Just make sure that it's actually like of quality and presentable. I did myself have a business card. I just found some template online and decided to get those printed out. And I did end up using a few of them at different conferences, especially when I was going through the application cycle. Um, when I would go to specific tables, it's not that I was just handing out my business cards. I kind of played it depending on how I felt about the interaction. Some tablers or exhibitors would directly ask me like, "Oh, just leave your business card and make sure to write down your AMC ID number on it." So that's obviously a perk to having a business card. You can easily remember you. They have your contact information. They have a picture on there, and and then you have your AAMC ID. So whatever, I'm not sure if that interaction went anywhere because I ultimately didn't get an interview there. But as you can see, it can definitely go a long way and be of benefit if you do have the business card. But I don't think it's absolutely necessary to do so.
Yeah, to add to that, again, I think as it was mentioned, I don't think it's necessary. To be quite honest, I feel like it's subjective. If you feel that you that's something that gives you an edge, I would say go for it. Personally, I felt like I leaned more towards having more organic conversations and kind of having a connection with that individual, and then that's kind of that detail I would share in the follow-up. But I think a business card, especially, I didn't see a lot of individuals have it, so I do think it makes you stand out in a unique way.
Thank you. The next question is, what if I can't afford the entrance fee for a conference? So I guess I'll chime in on this one. So for pre-health conference are often organized through student-run organizations. In my experience, a lot of these organizations have sponsors for students that can't pay the fee. And a lot of the times, if you email them, they can work something out with you. Um, so it really depends, but I would definitely, if this is the case, I would definitely reach out to the organization that's putting on the conference and asking if there's any way that you can be sponsor, or if you have, or if they have another way to help you, maybe with lodging or transportation. Sometimes they have carpool with nearby institutions, so that's another alternative. Um, and then for our next question, how do I decide between multiple overlapping workshops that I am interested in attending? So I'll let one of our speakers answer this question.
Hi, everyone. So in terms of this question, I really like this question because I encountered this a lot. And going back to Raul's suggestion, I thought that the buddy system was always a great tactic to make sure that I was able to get all the information and resources that I wanted to. So I would if my colleague and my peer, my friend, and I had similar interests, we kind of would tag team and say, hey, I'll go to this workshop focused on studying for MCAT. I'll take some really good notes, and I'll even record the session. And you're heading to the Women in Medicine panel. Do you mind if we, take some time after the conference to exchange contact information? So at that point, not only are you, not missing out on really relevant information that you're interested in, but you're also kind of essentially double networking. And that seemed to be like a really useful strategy. And even if you may not have a friend or a colleague that is going to the event, you can always meet someone then and there. I really always try to introduce myself to every person I sat next to at each workshop. It was a great opportunity not only for mentorship and again to network with the presenters, but also like a peer networking relationship. And I think again, that's something that gets kind of missed in terms of networking, the idea that it's not just a presenter or his or her networks, but it's also your peers, the students that you're sitting right next to. Those are also potential contacts to touch base with.
Thank you, Tiffany. Our next question is, I think we've addressed this question kind of. What type of questions should I ask presenters, mentors? So that I know that Raul went in depth and Tiffany about potential questions for institutions. I think for presenters, it really depends on your interest. If you've done your research about them and you see that they're doing interest in research in their institution and you want to partake in that, that's a good, maybe have them expand on their research, or if they're part of a nonprofit organization that you want to volunteer with, that's another way to get them engaged. If they're part of the admissions committee, that's another great way to have them talk about the institution you're interested in applying. So I think it really depends on the interaction that you have with a presenter and what your purpose is for that interaction. The next question is, how do I keep the contact information gathered organized? So I'll let someone else answer this question.
Yeah, so you're likely going to get a bunch of business cards from tablers or presenters themselves. So what I like to do is just make it a thing that at the end of the day, you go in and start writing out those emails, especially if you do intend on contacting them after the conference. Already start up that draft with the email so that you can at least for sure make sure you don't lose their contact information. Another thing that I just started doing was also taking a picture of their business card, so I don't have to keep a physical copy, but at least I have it on my phone if needed. And that way I kind of just organize it, the picture on my phone with all my, I guess, point of contacts for individual schools if I do need them in the future.
Thank you, Raul. I think personally, another way that I've kept myself organized is having an Excel sheet. Um, just pretty much writing down all the contact information, emails, institution, how I met this person, what conference it was, workshop, and stuff like that. Just to keep track of how many people I've contacted, or how many people I need to follow up with. So I think that's another way of keeping yourself organized. The next question is, what happens if I can only attend for partially? What happens if I can only attend partially, like a portion of the conference, not the whole thing? So I don't know if another speaker wants to chime in into this question.
Yeah, I say definitely.
Sure, I think this is a great question. Go for Raul.
Okay, just a quick point. Definitely make sure that you try to attend the conference, even if you can only attend a portion of it, if whether that be specific workshops that you may have an interest in. you could potentially meet a mentor or just simply learn a lot more about a topic of interest that you may have. If you can only attend the tabling event, then again, just go for it. At that point, you're not really, in a way, losing anything, but you have so much to gain from simply just going to a conference and being prepared and making sure that each interaction that you have is purposeful.
Tiffany, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to this question.
Hi, sorry, I got disconnected. In terms of just partially attending the conference, I think that's something that I myself didn't know that you could do. I felt like, if there was a time that I was busy, I typically tend to not attend the event, but later on, I saw individuals that would kind of opt out to leave early due to whatever commitments that they had. All that to say that you can definitely attend partially the conference. Don't feel like you're missing out. I will say though, you want to be mindful to make sure that you're not interrupting. If you're attending the second half, I would say, kind of try to make sure that you arrive early. And sometimes conference schedules tend to get delayed. So just being mindful and perhaps sticking towards sitting in the back. But again, don't feel like you're missing out if you're just able to attend the conference partially.
Thank you. The next question is how do I make myself stand out when talking to mentors? I don't know if my speakers want to add anything to this question.
Yeah. So how do you make yourself stand out? Well, for one thing, the fact that you have the appropriate attire, that goes a long way. Second is doing the research on the potential individual. If you know the speaker and what their background is, it kind of gives a little bit more preparedness to the interaction with the speaker after their presentation, or if you just run into them at the exhibitor fair or something like that. Um, I mentioned earlier that you want to make sure that each interaction that you have is purposeful, and that's when the elevator pitch kind of comes in. Uh, you should always just be in general prepared to kind of talk about where you're from and what your interests are, and how that coincides with an individual that you're speaking with. So definitely lay out, kind of follow the format that was presented in the slides. Kind of have your name, a little what your background is and what your interests are, and what you hope to gain out of this interaction, and whether that be simply finding out a little bit more about what field of research they're in, or what kind of a little bit. Let's say the physician is an internal medicine doctor, and your hope is to kind of learn more about that, what the process is, or get some shadowing experience. You make that very explicit in that interaction. That you're just hoping to learn a little bit more about what it means to be an internal medicine physician, for instance. Um, but I think that kind of just cuts directly to what the purpose of the interaction is, and it shows a little bit more of the preparedness. And I also want to do mention that you want to make sure that you read the environment that you're in. You're not going to have a full-on conversation with an individual, especially after they just finished a presentation, because there's going to be a whole bunch of other people behind you waiting to kind of talk to that individual. So just keep it short and quick, and just make sure. I would personally just say like, oh yeah, really, you made this one point in your presentation that kind of resonated with me. I was just hoping to kind of continue this conversation at a later time. If I can just send you an email, boom, you have a contact info, and you can kind of continue that conversation um, at a more appropriate time that isn't like everyone else is trying to talk to this individual. Um, But overall, though, that really it's just the preparedness. I think is where it really matters, where you're able to talk to someone and kind of show that you really are genuinely interested in what this person has to offer.
Thank you, Raul. And our last question is, what is proper etiquette when approaching mentors in crowded spaces? Um, so, from what I've experienced, it can get sometimes chaotic when you're trying to talk to one person and there's a lot of people standing waiting. But from what I've heard from other mentors is that they prefer to have some space between people waiting to talk to them and when they're carrying on another conversation, especially if you're hovering over them. I don't think that's the best way to go about it. So I think just waiting nearby to talk to a person, respecting their space, respecting the privacy of whatever conversation they're having. I think that's a good way to go. I don't know if any of the other speakers want to add anything.
Yeah, I think another thing to keep in mind is when you are waiting to talk to another speaker is, don't check your phone. Uh, Still keep eye contact, whether it be sometimes, again, as Raul mentioned, it depends on context. I've had opportunities where the presenter is engaging with the attendees kind of in a group setting. So, especially if it's like an attending, like a physician, and it seems like most people are interested in shadowing, that presenter may engage with the attendees in a group setting. I think, again, that's where you want to, body language is key. So, making sure that you're engaged, you have proper eye contact with him or her, as well as the peers and the attendings. But again, if the other context may be, the presenter is engaging with each attendee individually, again, you still want to be mindful. Try not to look at your phone, try not to be too distracting, or again, that presenter, that person at that moment, you're trying to get their contact information. So you want to make sure that you respect their time, even if it may take a little time on your end to wait to talk to them.
Raul, I don't know if you had anything to add to this question.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned it when answering the prior question, but just make sure to body language is a big thing. You want to make sure that you're showing interest, and you definitely don't do that if you're continuously looking at your phone, even if you do have to wait. Again, you want to respect the time that the individual is taking to be at the conference for one thing, but also take the time to speak to you after their presentation. So definitely be mindful of that, and just wait for the appropriate opportunity to speak with them. And even if you don't get that opportunity, let's say the speaker is running out the door after finishing the presentation because they have to catch a flight or something like that. If you try to find them online and just try to get the contact information from someone or a facilitator that's there, that works as well, as long as you uh, kind of have like a point to talk or to discuss about. It doesn't necessarily have to be something like, ideally you want to do have that in-person contact or I guess communication with the speaker. But if you're not able to do that, if you can simply just get an email address to follow up with them, that works easily as well.
Thank you. So at this time, I don't think we have any more questions from the audience. So I want to thank both Tiffany Calero and Raul Salazar for being part of this webinar. I appreciate both of your times. I think the information you share is very valuable. I also want to thank our speakers. I'm sorry, our attendees for tuning in. Um, And I don't know if there's any more questions from the audience before we close the session. Okay, perfect. So I'll be closing the session. Again, thank you very much to our speakers and attendees. Thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye, everyone.